The brand new 15-inch MacBook Air is more MacBook Air than any of Apple's previous MacBooks. It's bigger, yet lighter, more expensive, yet more affordable, and it fits a niche that I didn't know I was really looking for in a computer. First off, let's get some specs and ordering options out of the way so we are all talking apples to apples later in this video. The version that I specifically bought, no one provided me this laptop in any way, shape, or form. This is the cheapest base model that runs $1299. For this price, you'll get the 8-core M2 standard processor, 10-core GPU, 8 GB of unified memory, and a 256 GB solid-state drive. You don't get a lot of flexibility in the upgrade department here, but you can get more memory and more storage to the tune of 24 GB of unified memory and a 2 TB solid-state drive, which all comes to $2499. And let me say here real quick, I would have a really hard time recommending that tippity-top configuration to anyone. But we'll get more into the recommendations later. In the past week, I haven't just sat in my basement running a bunch of benchmarks and calling it a review. I've actually gone outside of the house and done things with the laptop. In fact, I typed this entire script from a hotel room as my family and I traveled for a big trip. So let's start with the things that I've liked. This is the best travel laptop that I've ever seen or thought about. That's not because it's the lightest, and that's not because it has the most horsepower. In fact, when I first got this laptop in hand, I really didn't know what I was going to do with it because it's not as powerful as my powerful computers, and it's not as small and light as like the MacBook Air 13. But this last trip really solidified how good this computer is for me. No kidding, it's the best travel computer because it threads the needle perfectly. And I know it's easy to fall into the YouTube hyperbole trap, and I'm trying to stay out of that. Here essentially I get the same screen space that I would from that bigger, much bulkier, and much more expensive MacBook Pro 16 for a fraction of the price and a fraction of the weight. This leads me into the next thing I've really liked. The weight of this laptop is mind-boggling. Now you do have to reorient your brain when thinking about the 15-inch MacBook Air because I don't think this is in competition with the MacBook Pro 14. And if you'd like to see a video comparing the two, let me know in the comments below. But the shape of the MacBook Air combined with its freakish lightweight makes it so enjoyable to carry around. I absolutely hate going through airports trying to lug around my MacBook Pro 16 in my work satchel because unfortunately, in the world that I live in, I always have to carry 2 computers and 2 phones, so hooray me. That over a pound of weight savings doesn't sound like a lot until you're trying to lug around a computer in a fancy satchel. And that weight savings being as impressive as it is comes in play for the next thing I've liked, the screen size to weight ratio. It's absolutely bonkers. No, it doesn't have ProMotion, and no, it doesn't have the hyper dynamic range chops of the MacBook Pro, but if you compare it to computers outside the Apple sphere, this is a killer display. 500 nits of brightness is just about the perfect level for usefulness on a computer that needs to be ready to operate in any environment. And even those, I'm pointing to my MacBook Pro 14 right now, even those super bright HDR panels generally can only do about 500 nits of brightness in standard dynamic range mode. The next thing I've liked is the physical construction. I was kind of nervous when they announced this, that if you took the MacBook Air chassis that was already super light and super thin, and then if you stretch it over a greater surface area, would that resulting laptop feel wobbly? Apparently hasn't, because this has felt great in use. I think they did increase the width by an ever so small amount, but it gives the whole shebang an amount of rigidness that is very assuring in the hand and makes me feel better that it won't get bent out of shape if it gets thrown in a backpack. The speakers are also awesome. One of the small exclusive differences between the Air sizes is the 15-inch Air gets 6 bottom firing speakers compared to the 4 on the 13-inch variant. And while I'm certainly no audiophile, you hear me say this every video I say how bad I am about judging audio, I think this sounds about as good as you can expect from a laptop. Yes, the MacBook Pro speakers are better, but those speakers are freakishly good. They're in like a whole other category that you almost can't compare them to other laptop speakers. Typing on the Air is pretty good too. It's got a very comfortable keyboard that is spaced out about as perfectly as you could hope. It works well enough from a table or from your lap while working in a hotel room. It is really good. It has the same edge as the MacBook Pro, but because the laptop's thinner, it is much more comfortable. You don't get those marks or the pain on your forearm as you're working for an extended amount of time. Performance has been fine. I'm not labeling this as something I like because I just expect these Apple M chips to work, and this does perfectly well for what you get, scoring pretty much identically to the smaller M2 MacBook Air on benchmarks that don't really matter. I would say that while all recent MacBooks are capable of being an all-in-one creation, consumption, gaming, in specific ways machines, this one doesn't feel like something that I would recommend for content creation. It's fine and it can do the job, but there are better, more powerful options out there. Speaking of the price, let's get into that. I both like and dislike the price. I think they were able to thread the needle pretty well in keeping this separate from the smaller MacBook Air, while also not intruding upon the higher performing Pro computers. But this runs into the exact same problem as the M2 MacBook Pro 13. The second you hit upgrade on any of the components we talked about earlier, you take this reasonably priced, reasonably powerful computer, and you start competing with the MacBook Pro 14, both the M1 and the M2 variants. And I hate to say it, and this shouldn't come off as controversial in any way, shape, or form, but the MacBook Pro 14 is superior in every single way except two. It's 3 ounces heavier, and the screen is ever so slightly smaller. That's why I think this makes the most sense in the base model configuration, because at $1299, it's actually pretty tough to beat this inside and outside of Apple's ecosystem. You straight up will not find another computer out there in the $1,000 to $1,500 price range that has this build quality, performance, weight savings, and screen size. If you think you have, please let me know in the comments. I'm not trying to be confrontational here. I'm not trying to go rough and tumble with you. I would actually like to know if another computer like this exists. But the MacBook Air 15 is not perfect, so let's get into the major thing I dislike. And man, do I dislike this. You can ask my son. My biggest pet peeve is having to repeat myself, and holy crap, I've been repeating this refrain for literal years at this point with Apple MacBooks. Don't use Thunderbolt 3 on laptops in 2023, especially if you can't make that work with multiple external displays. This shouldn't be that hard of an issue, but darn, I have to say this with every new standard M series processor release. The 2 ports themselves, that doesn't bother me as much anymore. And everything else is great, but darn, I thought we'd only have to say this for a year or so with the M1 laptops, and then through the magic of innovation, or the magic of just using what we already had, I wouldn't need to say this again. The Thunderbolt port on this MacBook Air will push out to a single 6K display. That's it. You can't even downscale to 2 4K displays. Sure, I only use one personally, but I know so many others that use at least 2 monitors. And what's most irritating is Apple had this all figured out back in the Intel days. The Intel Thunderbolt 3 would work with 2 external displays. Okay, long story long, would I recommend the 15-inch MacBook Air? Yes and no. I would not recommend this as a person's only computer if you do need to do power tasks. The MacBook Pro 14 is better situated for that in just about every regard. But I would absolutely recommend this to you if you are an office worker or a student that just needs basic computer functionality and you want the biggest screen possible. This computer absolutely crushes it in that very specific niche. And while that is a very specific niche, this is the best in what it does compared to anything else I've ever seen. Just give it a couple months to show up on the refurbished store before you actually buy it. Wink. And if you like this video, click here to see all the cool accessories you can get for it. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.